Narayana Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudiraye. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So we are continuing our discussion of the third canto. In the previous session, which was before the previous week, we spoke on some aspects of Guru Tattva as a part of the Birmingham Sunday program. And subsequently, before that, we were talking about the 14th chapter. The 14th chapter in Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto, actually has great instructions, and those instructions have to be understood because they also form the foundation of some of the verses that we chant before starting a Bhagavatam class. Oftentimes, you would notice in our temples that they start with Nashta Prayeshu, Abhadreshu, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavati Uttama Shloke, Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki. So what is the translation? By regular attendance in classes on Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of God, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Now, the main focus here is that all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. Yeah. Now let's look at one more verse, which is also chanted at the beginning of a class, practically every time a class is given in any one of our temples. This is one of the verses. Shanvatam Swatkata Krishnaha Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Hridi Antahastohi Abhadrani Vidunoti Suhrit Satam. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. So now, again, in this verse, the central focus is cleansing the desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee. Now go back again to Nashta Prayeshu, Abhadreshu. Abhadreshu essentially means it's highly inauspicious. Now, when we say highly inauspicious, it means that basically our category, or rather our consideration for what is auspicious and what isn't, has everything to do with spiritual life. What is auspicious is that which allows and facilitates spiritual life. What is inauspicious is that which takes us away from Krishna. So in the previous week, we spoke of forgetting Krishna and remembering Krishna. Whatever makes us forget Krishna is inauspicious, and whatever allows us to remember Krishna is most auspicious. So this is the criterion. Now, we see two verses that are being chanted before the beginning of the class. This has been a tradition that's been followed by Srila Prabhupada, and this, and in ISKCON, we follow these traditions. Different personalities also chant additional verses, but then these verses are very important because they're conveying the same message. They're practically saying, we need to follow the principle as enunciated, as demonstrated by Parikshit Maharaj, where he demonstrated an eagerness to sit and hear. Shanvatam. He practically demonstrated an eagerness to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam. He could have chosen to do n number of activities when he knew that he was going to leave the planet. But what was arranged for him by Krishna was for him to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, and this from Sukadev Goswami. And while Sukadev Goswami was speaking the Srimad Bhagavatam, it was also seen that there were other sages, including Vyasadeva and including Parashara Muni, the great personalities who were predecessors and gurus of Sukadev Goswami, were also present in the audience. Now, what is interesting is this happened right at the onset of Kali Yuga. What is the message which is being conveyed here? The message that's being conveyed here is the Shanvatam. If you have to progress in spiritual life, you have to progress at all. If there is a concept of Gati, Gati means forward movement for the Atma in this lifetime, in this particular journey, then one has to hear as Parikshit Maharaj did, and he has to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. And by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam in the line of disciplic succession, which means that faith that's been transferred from the heart of one guru to another, in that particular line where faith is being transferred, because all that we are doing is we are creating a transference of faith. We are creating impressions in the chitta. We are creating impressions in the consciousness by transferring faith from one heart to another. This is the disciplic succession. Faith is being received. Once faith is received, it qualifies one for experiences. Faith is then transferred and transformed into experiences. And then as the practitioner develops a deeper sense of sadhana, faith is transformed into experiences. So there is no question of faith if you're already seeing the divine couple. If you chant Hare Krishna and you see Sri Radha Damodar, you see Sri Radha Shyamsundar in front of you, in your eyes, then your sadhana is basically, you attain the goal and you're serving them directly. Now, that is a direct experience. There is no question of faith when you have direct experiences. When you see something in front of you, you don't really have to talk about faith. So the whole concept is there's been faith that's been transferred by those who have had direct experiences. That is pratyaksha, which is praman, which is basically proof, has been experienced. And once it has been experienced, it's being passed on. And when it is being passed on by those who have experienced, their sound vibration carries those experiences. It carries faith and it enters into our ears and it establishes itself very firmly in our heart and it dislodges something. Yeah. So what is it which is being dislodged? Parikshit Maharaj demonstrated that if there is a process of deliverance, this is the most effective process of deliverance, is to come in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam and in disciplic succession, which is the truth being represented as told by the predecessor acharyas. Yeah, you come in touch with the disciplic succession in the lineage, and then you absorb and you basically learn Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, the point is, what is the main observance which is being done here? There was Kirtan, which was done by Sukadev Goswami. Sukadev Goswami was performing Kirtan. Parikshit Maharaj was engaging in Shravanam. Yeah, so there was Shravanam and there was Kirtanam, but Shravanam required a singular focus. And then there was Kirtan, which was being done by those who carried faith. When I say carried faith, they practically had experiences that they were transferring onto the heart of the listener. So this is being demonstrated in Srimad Bhagavatam quite adequately, quite fascinatingly. But our focus today in this transference of faith, what is being destroyed? What is it that is being destroyed? Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu. They're practically saying, I'm going to remove all inauspiciousness from your heart. Just by speaking the Srimad Bhagavatam, Shinvatam Swakata Krishnaha, they're also talking about Abhadrani. Abhadrani is the same as Abhadreshu, which is in the subsequent verse. Abhadrani is that which is inauspicious, that which doesn't help, that which helps us forget, that which doesn't help us move forward, that is Abhadrani. Bhadrani, on the other, we use the word Subhadra, yeah, Subhadra Maya, Jagannath Baldev Subhadra. And so this particular reference to Subhadra is she's most auspicious because she practically connects one to the lotus feet of Krishna. She helps. So there is Subhadra, then there is Abhadra, which is Nashta Prayeshu, Abhadreshu, then there is also Abhadrani, which is also the same. Abhadrani is again, what is being conveyed here is that this is inauspicious, and inauspicious is being destroyed, it's being removed. But what is it which is being inauspicious? What is being referred to as being inauspicious? In reality, they are referring to the concept of desires. Desires in our heart are being removed. And these desires themselves do not fit in with the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. They do not fit in with the message of the scriptures. They do not fit in with the objective of Srila Rupa Goswami. Srila Rupa Goswami said, Anya Abhilashita Shunyam. Anya Abhilashita Shunyam. He practically said that one cannot have any other motivation other than wanting to pursue pure devotional service. Yeah, wanting to follow in the footsteps. Yeah, Krishna Anukulyena. Krishna Anukulyena. Basically, who is he saying we have to follow? He is practically saying, Srila Rupa Goswami is saying, yeah, Anya Bilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadya Anavritam, Anukulyena, Krishna Anushilanam, Bhakti Ruttama. He's saying that you need to give up all desires and follow in the footsteps. Anukulyena refers to following in the footsteps of Srimati Radharani. This particular reference here is Anukuliyena, is practically the most auspicious service that is being rendered, and rendered with the greatest level of love, unimaginable, limitless, absolute limit of love, is done by Srimati Radharani. So whom do we want to follow? Srila Rupa Goswami is practically saying, you can't have any other desires. You can't have desires for Gyan. Jnana is practically an elimination process by which one comes into awareness and understanding of what is true and what isn't true. They practically remove the concept of material versus spiritual, and then they choose spiritual. However, Jnana Marg talks about moksha, which is to leave the material sky. Srila Rupa Goswami says, don't set your bar so low. Don't go after such a low bar, because what's being offered by Harinam, what is being offered by Mahaprabhu is so high and so lofty that this is a very low bar if you were to set your goals on wanting just to be liberated from material issues or wanting to gratify your senses in different places. So he's saying, Anyabhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmari Anavritam. He's practically rejecting both, because both of these are very low bars, very, very low bars. I mean, compared to what can be obtained by the process given by the Acharyas, this is an extraordinarily low bar, and he's wanting us to reject it. And then he's wanting us to follow someone. He's practically saying you have to follow someone, Anukuliyena, and he is asking us to follow Srimati Radharani, because Srimati Radharani is the embodiment, or rather the most demonstrated principle of the greatest capacity of service, because service requires love. Service requires love. And for service to be done, service requires love. And what we need to understand is that without love, one can't be serving. Now, who has the greatest level of love for Krishna and awareness of what Krishna is desiring? That is Srimati Radharani. So who has the greatest capacity for service? It is Srimati Radharani. If anybody can serve, it is Srimati Radharani, because Abhideya, Bhakti is all about service. Abhideya is all about service. And who can serve? Only one who has love in the heart can serve. Who has the maximum amount of love? Srimati Radharani has the maximum amount of love. So again, this is coming back to what is in the heart and what is being carried and what is the intention in the heart of the devotees and what is going to be removed. What is going to be removed are intentions that are not friendly, intentions that are distinctly inimical and distinctly misaligned with the concept of service as initiated by Srila Rupa Goswami. So Nashta Prayeshu Apatreshu. And then the same thing here, Shanvatam Swakata Krishna, they're talking about Abhadrani. Abhadrani being removed, whatever is inauspicious being removed. Now, what is the nature of inauspiciousness that is being seen in the heart? The nature of inauspiciousness is that it is the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance. Desires are developed in the mode of passion. Desires are developed in the mode of passion. The mode of passion has the capacity to help one to be attracted to the phenomenon in the material world. So the mode of passion is required to function in the material world. In the office environment, in the corporate environment, one requires the mode of passion because they're surrounded by people who are extraordinarily passionate and who are surrounded by people who are also in the mode of ignorance. They don't have proper goals in life. And they set goals for themselves based on very temporal aspects of existence. They set goals for things which they are not clear about. They just don't know why they're doing what they're doing. Most people don't know why they are doing what they're doing. That's the unfortunate circumstance. They just do not know. They just get carried along by the neighbor, they get carried along by friends, they get carried along by the office colleague, the environment of the office. And all of this is being done in the mode of passion, because passion practically makes you window shop in the universe. Yeah, passion in the heart will make you go for a window shopping spree. Yeah, you all heard of the window shopping experience, which is you become attracted for no reason, no particular reason. You become attracted as you look around, and then you're seeing things. Yeah, you're seeing things and you're being exposed to phenomena. The senses are active. They are being stimulated by phenomena. And as they're being stimulated by phenomena and the senses are active, one becomes extraordinarily attracted to what they are surrounded by. And then they go after it. and then they don't get it. You see, the real issue of suffering is that our desires are created in the mode of passion. And most of us do not have the capacity to fulfill the desires we carry in our hearts. There is no karma for such desires. We just don't have the karma. We don't have the ability to create a future based on those desires. We carry those desires in our heart. So most desires carried by devotees, or I would say, sorry, not devotees, by people in general, they don't get fulfilled. Most desires carried by people do not get fulfilled. What happens when you have a desire in passion and those desires do not get fulfilled? That passion turns into anger. Yeah, it turns the passion, the initial attraction turns into lust, where one starts hankering. And when one starts hankering, they just can't seem to eliminate the thought of obtaining that object because the senses have been agitated. Because the senses are agitated, they're constantly wanting to acquire that particular object. They're constantly looking at it and saying, I don't have it in my life. I'm miserable. I'm unhappy because I don't have this. They have concluded that if they have something which they're desiring, they're going to be happy. So this may not be true, but it is already on because there's passion and the window shopping starts and then everybody else has it, so I need it. So there's basically the concept of convincing oneself that the world is basically telling us that this is what you need, otherwise you're not going to be happy. You know, a few years back, I was just making a mention of this to a friend. In America, perhaps in the UK as well, where most of you are from, it's a very common sight that when Apple announces the release of a new phone, there is madness in New York City, there's madness in different centers, Los Angeles, wherever, where people actually stay overnight in long lines wanting to get an iPhone. It's a phone. It's just a phone. But they want to stay in a long line. They want to wait overnight, and then they get the phone, which they can easily obtain, you know, at home if they were to order by mail or whatever it is, you know, if you order it online. But they stand overnight. It's just this craze of wanting to do what the world is doing. What was fascinating to me in those days was India, I started observing the same thing. It is one thing for people in America to want to buy $1,000 phone, yeah, because it's feasible. It is another to see long lines in Delhi, long lines in Mumbai, long lines in other cities in India, where people are just waiting to grab $1,000 phone, and they wait overnight. They inconvenience themselves. They stand in lines. It's just this madness. What is this madness? This madness is nothing but passion, and they are basically going through this particular phase of wanting something because the world is telling them that they should have it, and then they go after it. And there are those who don't have it, who feel that they should have it. So this is the mode of passion. The number one challenge which devotees face in the world, number one challenge to the sadhana of devotees, is being exposed to the passion of the world. This is the number one culprit, because what happens is that they expose themselves to the passion, and because they go to work and they need passion for them to exist there, because you need some level of drive for you to function and, you know, be a part of the environment which is being created in the world. And then they develop passion, and then devotees also start window shopping. Devotees also start window shopping. They start looking around. I'm not referring to window shopping of phone. I'm referring to window shopping as a concept of wanting things without really thinking through as to whether you really need it. Yeah. This is basically window shopping. So they start window shopping, and devotees actually become miserable. And this is a great, great calamity, because we have been given a process which has the ability to set moksha, which is liberation, as a low bar. Our acharyas, our predecessors, practically told us that moksha, which is considered to be the highest purushartha, it is considered to be the highest ayana. After many, many lifetimes, one reaches the point of being able to be liberated. That is considered to be tucha. It is actually considered to be insignificant and not worthy of pursuing as a goal, not wanting to even set a bar. They don't want even, to contemplate that as a bar to be achieved. But imagine that if that is considered to be a low bar by the predecessors, what would they consider desires in the hearts of the modern day Vaishnavas? They would consider them as highly troubling to sadhana. Because if moksha itself was considered to be a low bar, whatever is inside of our hearts in the modern day would be considered as highly troubling. So we have received a lot of mercy. We have received a lot of mercy to function as devotees in this present environment. If we haven't received the mercy, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing. We wouldn't be able to chant a single round because this environment is highly toxic and it is not very friendly for the purpose of devotional service. We have received immense mercy. We have received blessings so that we can overcome the challenge of abhadreshu, that which is inauspicious. Now, in the devotee concept, the point I'm trying to make here is that the devotees have this concept of passion in their heart because they come in touch with passion and they start desiring things in the world. And once they start desiring things in the world, they become unhappy when they don't get it. You see, you don't always achieve things. You don't always get things that you basically are craving for. You don't have that particular karma. You don't go there. You just don't get it. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is the root cause of misery amongst devotees, because you can't be miserable in devotional service. You cannot be miserable in devotional service when you're in touch with Krishna's names, when you're in touch with Krishna's Archa Vigraha, when you're in touch with Krishna's Dham, Krishna Katha, when you're in touch with Prasadam. You cannot be miserable. If you are miserable, it's because you have come in touch with the mode of passion. And because we have come in touch with the mode of passion, this mode of passion is such that it is very troublesome because it doesn't allow us to basically achieve things. It doesn't give you what you need, but then it makes you feel the pain for it. So what happens when someone becomes attracted to the phenomena around them? They become attracted and then they start wanting that particular desire. They start getting it. But then they're not going to get it because 99.9% of the population, they don't have the sukriti. They don't have the credits for them to be able to create a future based on their desires. They just don't. That is the reason why the world is miserable, is because they have all kinds of desires. And now with the internet, every villager in different parts of India, Africa, name it, every remote part of the world is able to see what they would want, but they can't get. So they have all kinds of desires and all kinds of, I would say, disappointments and anger and lust, which is being developing now. So it's a very toxic environment from the perspective. It's very toxic because you carry that. You basically can't get what you need because it is something which you really are desiring, but you don't have the ability to create that future. There isn't the power to create a future because there hasn't been a culture of giving. There hasn't been a culture of creating pious credits that can be used as currency to create a future. You need subtle currency to create a future. You cannot create a future for yourself with nothing. You need subtle currency. This was understood by the sages. It was also understood by the demons. Why do we see in our Puranas that demons used to go away and perform austerities? They used to perform all kinds of austerities just to obtain some favor, because they knew that they didn't have the credits. They need to accumulate the credits. The credit accumulation process involved chanting. The credit accumulation process involved austerities and so on and so forth. The demons were experts. They used to set goals and go after those goals, and they used to obtain those goals by knowing exactly what to do. Yeah, the sages knew it as well. But in the modern day, we don't have that luxury because no one is a sadhaka. In the strictest sense of the term, no one has time to do sadhana. They don't. An ordinary person has no credits because they really haven't done much in the previous lifetime for them to even obtain the credits to create a future for themselves. So what are they carrying in their hearts? They are carrying all kinds of unfulfilled desires, and these unfulfilled desires make them miserable. This is exactly what it is. This is abhadreshu. It's highly inauspicious. It's practically inauspicious to the point where it makes the person miserable. So the initial attraction turns into lust. Then when lust doesn't become fulfilled, it turns into anger. And then there's great destruction of intelligence. This is being seen. So in the previous discussion, I was wanting to touch upon it. I was wanting to basically put a separate note, perhaps a video on this, and I want to share this. In the previous session, the session before the previous session, that is, we spoke of the fact that Mother Diti, and this is Satya Yuga. Please understand, this is not Kali Yuga, this is Satya Yuga. Mother Diti is afflicted by lust. She is practically seeing her co-wives have children while she doesn't have children. So she is approaching her husband and she is practically afflicted. She's afflicted to such an extent that the Srimad Bhagavatam is describing a condition as one who is afflicted because her speech is wavering, it is very fast. And Kashyapa Muni, her husband, who is an extraordinarily powerful sage, he's a Prajapati, but he's an extraordinarily powerful sage. So he is looking at her and he understands the condition of her mind, and he understands the condition of her senses and so on, which are agitated by wanting to unite with her husband. Now, what does Kashyapa Muni do? What does he do? It's interesting to see in the previous chapter that for several verses of the previous chapter, Kashyapa Muni is practically praising Mother Diti. He is offering praise. He is practically trying to offer her praise and her, the position of who she is, reminding her of her high class position, reminding her of her prowess. He's practically praising her for several verses. Why is Kashyapa Muni praising her? This ought to be understood by devotees. We have to understand this because most devotees, I'm using the word most devotees can identify lust, and these are like the big boulders, or I would say gross afflictions which they face, and they try their very best to overcome such circumstances because it can be identified easily. If you see a disease that can be identified, and if it is spottable, where you can really see something happening, then you have the ability to fix it. You have the ability to fix it because you're able to see it, you're able to kind of experience it, and you're able to discern what it is. So at least the diagnosis is complete. If the diagnosis is complete, then more often than not, you can find a way to get out of the circumstance. Yeah. So most devotees can, and most devotees do overcome gross challenges of the senses. If they're very gross, they're able to overcome it because they're able to identify this. What devotees can't really see, they cannot see, is the buildup which leads to such issues. They cannot see this. That is why there are fall downs. That is why there are deviations that cannot be checked, is because you don't even know that something is going on which is problematic, and it's been going on for a while. So this particular chapter of the previous chapter gives us clues on how to recognize this. This is very important for us. Why do we find Kashyapa Muni praising Mother Diti? Because praise is simply a manifestation of sexual energy. It is a manifestation of sexual energy, which means the need for recognition, the need for praise, the need for power, the need for feeling good is all different variations of sexual energy. So he is practically trying to satiate her agitated condition by praising her so that that particular aspect could be pacified and she would calm down. He's trying that. He's trying his very best. He is such a powerful sage that he knows how the subtle operates. He knows what is the subtle version of what is gross. So if someone is running after adoration, if someone is running after fame, if someone feels very bad because they're not being recognized and they're constantly wanting to be recognized, and they're making the best arrangements for themselves for them to be recognized, and they're running after that particular objective of wanting more and more recognition and fame, this is nothing but a manifestation of sexual energy. That is being taught to us by Kashyapa Muni. He is practically praising Mother Diti to pacify her agitated condition. He was not trying to talk her out of it. He was practically giving her something at a subtle level without agreeing to what she wanted, because the time when she approached him for union was highly inauspicious. He knew this would be calamitous for the world. He also knew that he cannot basically, what I would call as, refuser because dharmically he's not supposed to. So he was trying his best to give her what we would call a subtle aspect of what she was desiring. Praise and adoration are nothing but manifestations of sexual energy. And these are nothing but what we would call as a subtle form of sexual energy. That is what is being shown to us in the previous chapter. Now, does it mean that he succeeded? He did not succeed. He did not succeed in his attempt to pacify Mother Diti. He couldn't. But what is to be learned by us as practitioners is to watch out for this enemy. We as devotees can identify gross issues. Every one of us is sincere. Anyone who has come in touch with the movement is sincere. To whatever level they can, they're trying their very best. The devotee community is trying their very best despite all the stimulation of the senses that goes on in the world. They're trying their very best. But what really catches them off guard is what is very subtle, that which can't be seen, but which is like what we would call, a factor that's looming inside and which one can't recognize, but it starts manifesting at a subtle level. A lot of people can't recognize this. They don't recognize the fact that one is desiring fame and they're going after fame as an objective. And oftentimes I hear this. I hear this even from devotees of wanting to set objectives, of wanting to achieve things. That's wonderful if you want to achieve things for Srila Prabhupada. But to achieve things, one first needs to understand what Srila Prabhupada really desires us to achieve. Yeah. Achieving things for Prabhupada requires us to understand what is it which Srila Prabhupada actually desires us to achieve. He wants us to chant. He wants us to chant the pure name. All the sacrifices of Srila Prabhupada, all the sacrifices of every guru who has walked on the planet has been for the purpose to facilitate the chanting of Harinam. There's really nothing else. They have only given us faith. They have given us an enormous level of faith. They have distributed faith into our hearts because they carry that faith in their hearts. They went around, they distributed faith, and they're expecting us to follow through by chanting Harinam. This is the expectation. There's no other expectation from the Parampara. The Parampara does not have any other expectation from us. So for us to start thinking that we can serve and we can do so many wonderful things and we can be a famous preacher, we can be this and we can be that, we can have so many different YouTube hits or Instagram hits or Facebook hits, I don't know, whatever else it's called. These days the measure of success is all on the social media platforms. Yeah. This is basically a strategy. Now, one may say that I'm trying to achieve things for Srila Prabhupada. I'm wanting to do this, yeah, which is all fine. The objective seems to be wonderful. But this is where trouble begins, because this is nothing but a subtle aspect of power that has practically come and it is manifesting itself. So one needs to watch out in that position. I'm not saying that devotees shouldn't pursue recognition. They should not pursue recognition for itself. And if they're recognized for whatever preaching they do, and if they're recognized for how many people they have basically assisted in their lives and improving their lifestyles and so on, that's wonderful because Krishna is giving them that. But it is another for us to keep that as an objective. If you start keeping that as an objective, then it's problematic. If you start strategizing that this is what I'm supposed to do, I'm supposed to have a strategy of wanting to be recognized, I am supposed to have a strategy of wanting to become famous, etc., then you have a problem because this is nothing but a manifestation of what people are abstaining from. They may not engage in gross activity of the senses. They may not engage in gross activity of the senses because they are not engaging in gross activity and they have not really controlled this desire for sexual activity. It just transforms itself into a desire for recognition. It transforms itself into a desire for power. It transforms itself into a desire for control. So this is just a subtle transformation. This subtle transformation was demonstrated by Kashyapa Muni. He practically demonstrated the fact that he started praising her. Because what else would you do? You see, someone who is an adept such as he is, who understands the difference between subtle and gross, the first step that he's trying to do is to pacify that energy. and he's pacifying it by giving her something at a subtle level to reduce her agitated state. This is all he's trying to do in those particular few verses where he's praising. He was not someone who can be called ignorant. He practically knew exactly what to do, and he practically offered her a subtle aspect of what she was wanting. Why is this an important message? Exactly for the reason I spoke of earlier. We need to recognize that if we are more and more afflicted, agitated, we are more and more eager for recognition, eager for praise, and we are hunting for it, we are looking for it, and we become disappointed, we leave because we don't get it. All of these are simply signs where our own, inability to manage our sexual energy is practically coming up in the form of all of these desires. We need to recognize the subtle, because everybody can recognize the gross. But by the time the subtle becomes gross, it could be too late, which is why people fall down. People fall down in a movement, but then the fall down doesn't occur overnight. It's been building up for years. It's been building up for years. It has gone unchecked. It has not been seen. It is not being curtailed because they can't recognize it. And then, boom, one fine day you find that the person is in trouble. Yeah. So recognizing it is very important. Recognizing it is very important. And then once you recognize the fact that there is a problem and there are these desires, what is it that we need to do? We simply need to start writing down why we are doing what we're doing. Write down why we are performing devotional service. Write down what is the objective. Write down what is it that we want to achieve by the end of the year to please Srila Prabhupada. What is the quantum of service that we want to do? How many rounds do we want to chant on a particular day? How much reading that we want to do? What is the amount of books that we want to distribute? All of this is very, very important for us, but it also has to be in paper. It has to be written down. Why am I saying this? Is because if you have energy and if you have, I would say, potency, then you need to know how to transform it. You need to set higher objectives. If we set higher objectives, then we have the ability to take what is lower and then transform it into the higher and apply it practically. So this is very important for us. Very, very important for us to constantly remind ourselves as to why we're doing what we're doing. Put it down on paper, have a goal, because without a goal, we wouldn't be able to manage the mode of passion. Every day, we would want to remind ourselves as to why we exist. We want to remind ourselves, why am I going to work? Because there's a practical need to maintain the family, to maintain oneself, body and soul. But why am I going to work? I'm going to work to maintain myself because there's a practical need to maintain myself. One requires money for the sake of money so that we can maintain ourselves. Yeah. So we need to remind ourselves, is that the goal of life? Is my job me? Am I the job? Yeah. Am I the particular relationship I am in? Who am I? What am I doing? What is the particular goal in life and what am I trying to pursue? We need to write down on a daily basis and remind ourselves, because we often tend to forget. We often tend to focus on the details of the day. We start thinking that we ought to preach, and then we start thinking that we ought to be making other people Krishna conscious, whilst we might just forget to be Krishna conscious ourselves. This is a danger. Yeah, we might be going around wanting to make others Krishna conscious, but we may not be Krishna conscious ourselves. So we need to be very careful about these things. So sometimes I'm not trying to say that people who are all famous, etc., are all, basically desiring that. No, this is not my message. My message is very simply that if these desires come in the heart of exclusively wanting to be famous, wanting to be recognized, wanting this and that in the world, be very careful, because this is nothing but a subtle manifestation of what the underlying issue is. The underlying issue itself is something else is building up. And then over a period of time, when the person is weak, the immune system is weak, that will manifest fully, and then there will be long-term damage. So before the long-term damage occurs, one needs to constantly write down their goals and remind themselves, okay, this is a goal. What is it that I can do to basically what I would call as, what is it that I can do to basically recognize whether I'm on track or I'm not on track? What is it that I can do? You can recognize whether you're on track or not on track, not so much by examining what is going on in the heart. It's very difficult because sometimes the mind will convince itself that it is on the right track. So the best way to examine oneself is to constantly examine if the output, the activity done on a daily basis is consistent. Are we able to get up? Are we able to chant? Are we eager to chant? Are we eager to get up so that we could chant? Are we eager to maintain, some strictness with what we honor as prasadam? So are we strict with prasadam standards? Are we strict with reading standards? Are we strict with how we interact with devotees? Are we constantly reminding ourselves as to what is it that we are supposed to do? We need to examine those areas on a daily basis. That is what we need to do. We cannot fully apprehend, we cannot fully understand whether we have been able to overcome our challenges. We cannot. We may not be able to fully understand it. We may never be able to fully understand it. It is better for us to focus on the output, because what you are going to do on a daily basis is easily understood. If I'm going to have challenges in chanting, if I'm having challenges in maintaining a proper regulative principle observance, if I'm having challenges in interacting with devotees, if I have all these challenges, then one needs to sit down and look at the fact that there's something going on which is even bigger. Yeah. So we need to start examining what is outside and what we are doing more closely for us to understand if something is working or not working. For us to ensure that we don't get trapped in a cycle that we can't recognize because it's very subtle, we need to have goals. If you don't have goals, you're going to be in trouble. You need to have goals, and goals have to be measurable. You need to be able to take a goal and say that this is what has been achieved, and needs to be achieved. This is what I achieved the last week. This is what I achieved last year, and this is what didn't work, and this is what worked. This has to be done on a daily basis. If you don't do all of this, and if you don't keep in touch with what you're doing and examining it, you can do it as a group, you can do it individually. You can do it in Sangha, you can do it as a part of a group. All of these can be done. If you don't do it, then what does happen is that over a period of time, all this builds up and it becomes very problematic over a period of time, because it builds up and then you won't even know that there's something going on with our lives. So that's what we learned in the previous chapter. And what happened eventually, Mother Diti and Kashyapa Muni united at an inauspicious time. They were forced to, basically unite at an inauspicious time. They were forced to do it. And because they united at an inauspicious time, the conception itself was very problematic for the entire world. Yeah. The conception itself was very problematic for the entire world. The conception practically was inauspicious and became an agent of destruction. So she practically carried the impregnation for a much longer term than normal, because she did not want the birth of these children, because it was foretold by her husband, Kashyapa Muni, that the children she was carrying in her womb are going to be sources of great calamity to pious people. They are going to draw the wrath and the anger of the Brahmanas. They are going to go against the desires of the devotees. They're going to harass people, and they're going to be a great burden on society. This was told by the husband, who was a great personality. So she did not even want to deliver these children. She was actually very happy when she heard that both of her sons would be killed by the personality of Godhead, because then they would be delivered. She was happy that their death was not going to be due to the curse of the Brahmanas. She was actually happy that the death itself was going to be due to the chakra of the Lord. He is going to practically kill them. He is going to kill them. Krishna is going to kill them. And then she was also very thrilled that a grandson would be born in that lineage who will be a great devotee of the Lord. So she practically was thrilled with that particular news. So, but yet she held on to this pregnancy. She held on to these children in the womb. And by holding on to these children in the womb, who were supposed to cause such destruction, she practically obstructed the entire universe. The entire universe started observing all kinds of dark phenomena. All kinds of negative omens, all kinds of very inauspicious signs started manifesting in and around the universe. Yeah, it started manifesting in and around. And these inauspicious signs were such that the whole kingdoms of the heavenly kingdoms, they started observing inauspicious signs. Nobody could function because it was so dark. It was so difficult and so dark of what she carried in her womb that nobody could function. Everybody runs to Lord Brahma for a solution because he is all-knowing. He is an expansion of Krishna. He is the Guna Avatara. He is empowered to practically be the secondary creator. He is empowered to be the origin of all the jivas, in one sense, coming into the world and coming into the universe. Yeah, he is facilitating their karma. So everybody runs to him because he's all-knowing. And because he's all-knowing, he starts describing what happens. He starts describing the fact that his sons, these Kumaras, the Kumara brothers, the four brothers, and they were basically the firstborn of Lord Brahma from his mind. And he wanted them to get married and become progenitors, Prajapatis, but they refused because they wanted to observe and pursue transcendental goals. And these great sages, they never grew beyond, their body never grew beyond that of a 5-year-old. Like, we call this whole concept of being a Bala Brahmachari. Someone is a very small child, at the age of 7, normally, there is the ceremony of, the going into Brahmacharya, going into the spiritual master's ashram for cultivation of spiritual objectives. And before that, the Upavita ceremony is done, which is the giving of the sacred thread. Then the shika is given, and all these things are being done. Now, the point is that the sages never grew beyond that. So by appearance, they looked like very small boys, and they never wore anything. They were digambar, which means that they did not even wear kaupins, etc. And they basically were very young, small boys, 5-year-old, 7-year-old, with Brahmanical effulgence and very powerful sages. And they had freedom to travel. So they crossed over, and then they went into the Vaikuntha planet within the universe, because every universe has Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. Every universe has Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. There is Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, who is maintaining the universe, and then there is Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, who is basically the origin of all the avatars who come, but he is also in the Shira ocean, and then he is also expanding as the super soul into the hearts of everybody. Now, they all went to meet Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, which is also a Vaikuntha region, but it is within the material universe. It is almost like, you can say, a section of the universe where Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, he is in the Vaikuntha planets, he is in the spiritual sky, but there is access from the universe where one can go there, because he also has the role of a Gunavatar. He is practically managing the universe as the Gunavatar. He is managing the mode of goodness, and he is also the super soul of the jivas. He is practically, with every entity, he is in the heart along with the entity. So they went there, and they crossed these doors of the Vaikuntha. And there's a great, wonderful description of the Vaikuntha planets in this chapter, and the wonderful variegated nature. They also describe the nature of people, the personalities who are there. Everybody in that particular planetary system, in the Vaikuntha, they all have 4 arms. These are Vishnu Dutas. They all have 4 arms. And then they are very, very beautiful to look at. And they are very attractive. And the women are also equally attractive. And the men and women, they're all traveling in different chariots. And these chariots themselves are practically moving from one place to another in this particular planet. They're all singing and praising the Supreme Person. They're engaging in kirtan, and they're completely absorbed in kirtan and engaging in wonderful activities. Now, they all practically are mirror images of Lord Narayan. They look like Lord Vishnu. They practically have 4 arms. They carry the conch. They carry the wheel, the chakra, they carry a gada. They are practically manifestations, mirrors. Yeah. So they look at the appearance is almost as if you have several personalities who are extraordinary, who are traveling, and they're all deeply devotional, they're very powerful. And then their own associates, which is the consorts, are expansions of Mother Lakshmi in many ways, but they're also servants, but they're expansions. So you can look at it from that perspective, that they're also basically expansions to serve Krishna. Now, this particular wonderful sight is being described in this chapter, and the Kumara brothers reach Vaikuntha and they cross over and they reach the seventh gate. There are 7 gates. They are not stopped at any gate. They reach the 7th gate, and there they find these 2 great personalities, the Vishnudutas, the servants of Lord Vishnu. They are there, and these great personalities have 4 arms. They are extraordinary to look at. Both of them are wearing garlands with bees humming around those garlands, and they are almost a mirror image of the master whom they are serving. And they are there, and then what is being seen by the sages is that they are also agitated. There is some anger in their eyes. Their eyes are reddish, and their nostrils are somewhat, I would say, conflicted, which basically means that they're kind of breathing heavily. So as a consequence, it appears as if the nostrils have expanded, and it is all due to the fact that they're agitated. So they stop the Kumaras right there, and the Kumaras, they curse them. They curse them, reminding them that because you're seeing duality, because you're stopping us, and in Vaikuntha, no one is supposed to be stopped because there are no enemies. There is no duality. There is no such thing as a friend and an enemy. You're stopping us, so you're participating in the activities of the material creation. Because you're participating in the activities of the material creation, you don't belong to the Vaikuntha planets. So they curse them to fall down into the material region. They are practically cursing them to fall down because the quality and the demeanor and the behavior doesn't suit them. It doesn't suit the environment. They're not supposed to be in the position they're in because they're completely unqualified. Because they're demonstrating traits which are not a part of Vaikuntha. In Vaikuntha, no one is an enemy. No one can dare enter Vaikuntha to attack Lord Narayan. No one can do that because no one is capable of entering Vaikuntha because of the transcendental nature of Sri Vaikuntha. Nobody can. And then they curse them. So this curse practically makes the 2 doorkeepers of Lord Vishnu, Jaya and Vijaya, they become very agitated. They become very afraid, and they start submitting themselves to the sages. They start begging for forgiveness because a Brahmanical curse can never be overturned. It's very, very difficult to overcome anything that is done to qualified Brahmanas, because by nature, the Brahmana belongs to the mode of goodness. The mode of goodness is very subtle. If you create a problem with the mode of goodness, you cannot resolve that problem with passion and ignorance, because the mode of goodness is so much higher. So there's really no way for people who have created problems with the mode of goodness to resolve the mode of goodness issue. They can't. So if someone does something, for example, to a cow is in the mode of goodness. Brahmanas are in the mode of goodness. Vaishnavas in the mode of goodness. So as a consequence, the consequences themselves are very heavy because it's almost unresolvable, and this Brahmanical curses can never be overturned. Now, if a person is very powerful spiritually, which means that they have done a lot of austerities, they carry a lot of power, and they're very potent. If they ever turn into a demon, they're going to be super, super powerful. That is why this concept of Brahma Rakshas, an ordinary ghost is of an ordinary living entity, but a qualified Brahmana becomes a ghost because of some misdeed, then that particular Brahmanical ghost is called Brahma Rakshas, which is very difficult to overcome. It's very powerful because of the fact that this person who became a ghost was very powerful from a pious standpoint. It's almost as if it is the opposite of what occurs. If someone is very powerful, they can turn into a very powerful demon. Yeah. It's very, very interesting to see this transformation. That Jaya and Vijaya, because they were Vishnudutas, they were practically the servants of the Lord. They were in Vaikuntha. They were most powerful. Yeah, they had the opulences. Almost 89% of what can be attained was fully attained by these Vishnudutas, right? 89%. If there are 64 qualities and 50 qualities can be attained by a jiva, someone who is in Vaikuntha can attain 50 qualities. They can, fully. So you can imagine how powerful they are, because they are more powerful than the demigods. They are more powerful than anything that's been created because of the power that they have in their whole, the spiritual power that they carry. A single mistake such as this, an offense to the Vaishnavas, an offense to the devotees, practically brings them down from where they were into the material sphere, into the womb of Mother Diti. Yeah? So this is almost as if the mistake done by Diti is matched with the mistake done by Jaya and Vijaya. This is how it works in reality. Yeah? Why is it so difficult for an ordinary living entity to get a human body? Why is the human body being praised as a wonderful opportunity? And it's very difficult for us to understand this because, especially in India, you walk into any street and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. There's 1.5 billion people. How do you convince yourself this is a rare birth? How do you convince yourself of the rareness of, 6 billion plus people on the planet? It is rare because the opportunity set to get into a family with opportunity for devotional service is very rare. Yeah. You can just imagine, those days there were 4 varnas. So it was very easy to qualify one as a Brahmana, qualify one as a Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. When someone departs from the body, you send them back into a qualified Brahmana, qualified Kshatriya, qualified Vaishya, qualified Shudra family. Yeah. The soul comes back into the same kind of varna if they have not moved forward or they haven't obtained forward gati. But take the modern phenomena. The modern phenomena is a complete mess. So you have the internet. So people are desiring to be in America. They're born in India. They go to America. Or you have someone born in India. They go to some other part of the world. And then you have this mix-up of desires and the mix-up of people and the mix-up of karma, which is so complex that you can't even identify where a jiva is supposed to be put into based on the karma, because the karma itself has become very complex. So it's a very, very difficult circumstance. For devotee families, it's relatively easy because most devotee families, for most part, follow almost the same regimen. They follow the same regimen almost, which means that everybody has their little altar. They follow, the offering, which we do. They honor prasadam. They have the same kind of desires of wanting to visit Mayapur, Vrindavan. They have the same kind of desires. So for a devotee who departs from a devotee body, for a devotee who departs from the world, such a devotee coming back is relatively easy because the devas can match the karma to a large degree because of the number of devotee families around the world. The devas can match them. They can send the jiva into any one of these families because a lot of them basically would qualify one way or the other. But it is not the same with others. So that's why for them, getting a human birth is very difficult. That gives you the opportunity to pursue Krishna consciousness. So what is the guarantee that we're going to come back into a womb and, which is going to allow us to pursue Krishna consciousness as we did in this particular lifetime? There is no guarantee. That's why this lifetime is so precious. Now, Mother Diti becoming impregnated and wanting or desiring impregnation at an inauspicious hour, wanting to unite with her husband at an inauspicious hour, is matched with the offense committed by Jaya and Vijaya. So it's almost as if there is an event that is occurring in the spiritual sky in Vaikuntha, and the offensive personalities can be sent into the womb of a person who is practically wanting to engage in union at an inauspicious hour. So there are so many different intricate connections of karma that are being made that this whole thing practically becomes a circumstance of the offenders from Vaikuntha being transferred into the womb of Mother Diti. And because she conceived, at an inauspicious hour, she practically is bringing in children who can cause great destruction, which means great power is needed. So these great personalities from Vaikuntha have such great power that they have great power for destruction as well. And they come into the womb of Mother Diti. And Mother Diti, because of her strength and because of who she is holding on to these unborn children. She's prolonging the pregnancy. She is wanting the world to be free from calamities for as much time as possible. So she's holding on to this. And as she's holding on to this, she's practically affecting the entire universe. Everybody is seeing all kinds of phenomena. There's darkness everywhere because she's holding on to this pregnancy. That is the power of being connected. You see, this is the amazing power of being connected. If someone is a personal servant of the Lord, them becoming a demon means that there's all kinds of changes will be seen by the entire universe, which is what was seen by this Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu being in the womb of Diti, and she was holding on to it. Now, what is being seen here is that offenses were committed in Vaikuntha. See, it was not gross sin, it was offenses. Offenses are not the same as being sinful and weak. Yeah. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Mahaprabhu forgives his personal servant. He is a personal servant, which is unimaginable. He's a personal servant of Mahaprabhu, but then he gets attracted by the gypsies. The gypsies practically lure him because they kind of use some charms and lure him. And he gets attracted because he's weak. Mahaprabhu doesn't leave him there. He goes and he drags him by the hair and brings him back on track. So this is a sign of weakness. So Mahaprabhu is forgiving and he's bringing his servant back. Yeah. But on another occasion, there is this other person who is a sannyasi who becomes an offender because he breaks a principle. Yeah, it is more of a mental break. It is not a physical break. It's more of a mental break. He breaks a principle. Mahaprabhu tells him to go drown himself. He practically goes to the Ganga and drowns himself in Ganga. So Mahaprabhu was very serious with offenders. He was very lenient with weak people. Weak people, sinful people, can be forgiven because they're weak. They need to be given a chance. They need to be pulled up. Offenders cannot be forgiven. They need to be punished. This is being seen throughout history. This is what is being seen in the Bhagavatam. We are seeing that this particular circumstance is a circumstance of an offense. These are great personalities, the Vaikuntha, doorkeepers. They have direct service to Krishna. Now, if they commit an offense, then it is unpardonable because their knowledge level is very different. It's very different from someone who is just weak and who falls apart because their senses can't really manage the assault. Their senses can't be handling the stimulation. So this is very important for us to learn that there's a distinction between being offensive and being weak. Being weak, you can ask for help. Being an offender, there's no one to turn to. No one to turn to. Which is the difference? That is the distinction that is being shown here. I'm going to stop here. The coming week, we will do the verses and then we will complete chapter 15. But then Krishna comes down and he starts seeking forgiveness from the sages. When I say Krishna, I'm talking about Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu comes down, he starts seeking forgiveness from the sages on behalf of his servants. And the first thing he says is that they have forgotten me. They have practically disregarded me. And the servants, Jaya and Vijaya, they begged the sages saying, please do anything to us, but don't make us forget our master. Please don't make us forget our master. Yeah. He's practically saying, don't make us forget our master. This is being asked of. Yeah. So that is basically the request of the doorkeepers, Jaya and Vijaya. So we'll stop here and we'll take questions if there are any. And the subsequent week we'll start with and we'll complete chapter 15 of the third canto. So to summarize, as if you're writing questions or wanting to speak, to summarize, we spoke of the fact that we start every Bhagavatam class with the verses which talk about Abhadreshu and Abhadrani. Abhadreshu is that which is inauspicious. Abhadrani is that which is inauspicious. We want to understand what is it which is inauspicious. Inauspicious is nothing but the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance. Removing the desires that have come into our hearts because of the coming in touch with the mode of passion is basically accomplished through the hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam. That is considered to be the number one cleansing that is required. Because if that cleansing is done, then the process of anartha nivritti is complete. Yeah. Then one still can go forward, even though there are some very subtle attachments and very subtle, I would say, challenges left, one can still go forward. So what is being seen here is that you come in touch with the idea of wanting to remove inauspiciousness. And we also understand that the greatest inauspiciousness which we carry is the mode of passion. We also understand that the difficulty with the challenge that we face is the fact that it cannot be recognized very easily. Devotees can recognize gross irregularities. If someone is deviant, if they are breaking principles, they can understand that they are breaking principles. They need to put in some effort so that they can come back on track because they can see it. But what cannot be seen is that which is subtle. And that which is subtle is what is occurring in the background and is slowly, steadily building up over a period of time until it actually results in the breaking of principles. So what is subtle is what needs to be recognized. And we saw in chapter 14 how Kashyapa Muni was praising Diti. Mother Diti appeared to be agitated with sexual desire. She wanted to unite with her husband at an inauspicious hour when he was just doing his evening prayers. He couldn't even complete his evening prayers. And she practically forced them to unite. But what did he do when she was trying to ask him to unite with her? The first thing that he did when he saw that Diti was agitated, the first thing that he did was he started praising her. Then one needs to understand, why was Kashyapa Muni praising Mother Diti? He was reminding her of her high birth. He was reminding her of her extraordinary position. All of that can be said. But more importantly, he was praising her because praising her is also one way of satisfying the manifestation of sexual energy. Because sexual energy at a very subtle level can result in deep, deep, deep desires for fame, deep desires for recognition, deep desires for power. These are all aspects of sexual energy. So what did Kashyapa Muni do? He saw that his wife was agitated. He saw that it was an inauspicious time. He saw that she needs to be pacified. So the first thing that he did was he tried to praise her so that he could offer her what would be called subtle gratification, so that whatever her challenges were at that point in time would be diminished, and then she would come to her senses and then not be demanding at an inauspicious time. So he started praising her because praise, fame, desire for recognition, these are all subtle aspects of sexual energy. What doesn't manifest in the gross form as wanting contact with the opposite gender due to the agitation of the senses by the objects of the senses? What doesn't manifest in the gross form can start manifesting at the subtle level and can start causing issues. So he wanted to satisfy the subtle part. By satisfying the subtle part, he wanted to pacify them. This is what we need to recognize as devotees. If we develop deep desires of wanting to be recognized, wanting to be famous, wanting this, wanting that, please mark it down, because these are all nothing but manifestations of sexual energy. Something is unsatisfying, and because it is unsatisfying, and it cannot be exercised in the gross form, in the physical form, because you're following regulated principles, it starts coming up in the subtle form. And these subtle desires for recognition and fame and so on are nothing but a manifestation of what is gross has now become subtle. So we should recognize it, because this is going to build up. And one day it would cause gross breakdown of principles. So we should start recognizing this at the start. How do we manage this? We spoke of writing down goals. Because oftentimes, what is highly misleading for devotees in the modern day is the fact that we are in touch with passion. Because we are in touch with passion, we develop desires because we window shop in the world. Because we're window shopping in the world and we develop desires that can't be fulfilled because of various reasons. One, it may not be conducive. B, we may not have the sukriti or the purchasing power to fulfill such a desire. C, it may just take time and we don't have that kind of time. In all of these circumstances, what does happen is that those desires become an attachment which is unfulfilled. Basically attachment turns into lust, and then lust which is unfulfilled turns into anger, and then you have a complete breakdown of the individual. This is basically a breakdown of the intelligence, and then you have all kinds of challenges come up in the life of the individual. So we need to be very careful in recognizing what is needed to be managed and how it should be managed and what needs to be taken care of. Yeah. So we'll stop here and we'll see if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them or comments. Let's see, maybe there is something in the chat. Yeah. Should we be living on the basic necessities of life, as seems to be suggested in 4.21, or is there nothing wrong with living in luxury in big houses, driving flashy cars, having the latest iPhone, etc., as long as devotional service is performed? I don't think the message has anything to do with having the necessities or not having the necessities of what would help us. Yeah, I have an iPhone, by the way, so I have nothing against iPhones or any good phones, etc. I have nothing against them at all. The point I was just wanting to make is the fact that you can't have desires that can't be fulfilled and that practically can transform themselves into dissatisfaction, into rage. Because oftentimes we hear of devotees who are unhappy. Unhappy and the word devotee are a complete disconnect. These two concepts can't exist in harmony. They cannot exist. It's a complete contradiction. So why is a devotee unhappy? A devotee is unhappy even though he is in touch or she is in touch with Krishna in so many different ways, is because they're also in the mode of passion. Being in the mode of passion practically builds desires, and those desires can't be fulfilled. Because they can't be fulfilled, they tend to cause a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, and leads to situations of feeling remorse, and one becomes down, and they feel as if life is not giving them what needs to be given. Now, the point I want to make is to convey the answer to your question. There's nothing wrong because someone wants to live in luxury in a big house. They want to drive a large car or a flashy car, as you put it. They want to have the latest iPhone. Nothing wrong as long as devotional service is being performed. But if there is, because that is basically what they want. You see, their mind and their psychology is quite complex. They can handle a big house. They can handle a flashy car. They can handle, the latest gadgets and so on and so forth. Their psychology is quite complex. They need all of this for them to feel comfortable in doing what they're doing. So there's nothing wrong with it. So there's really nothing wrong with it if you can perform devotional service. But the same objective for someone else can become problematic because they don't have the ability to deal with the complexity that is associated with a large house, big cars, etc. Because large houses, big cars require big payments. Big payments require a lot of work. It requires passion. And again, you're coming in touch with the mode of passion. Some people can deal with it. Some people cannot. But what should we desire? We should desire pure devotional service. So we want to constantly remind ourselves as to what is the goal. So nothing against living one way or the other. Yeah. Someone could be living under a tree and they could become so attached to the tree that they would attack anyone who comes and sits under the tree. Yeah. Or someone could have a large house and they could just give away the entire house for the performance of kirtan. So the point being, that's not what I was wanting to convey. I was wanting to convey the fact that we should watch out for what we are desiring, because most of our desires are not going to be fulfilled. We should desire pure devotional service. That is the safest thing to do. That was the message I was trying to convey. Yeah. If your psychology allows you to have a complex lifestyle, so be it. We have nothing against it. There are devotees in the movement, and I'm not talking about recent times. I'm talking about devotees in the movement during Lord Chaitanya's time, who were very opulent. There was Pundarik Vidyanidhi. He was a businessman, and he was an extraordinarily powerful, very, very rich and opulent personality, where one enters into his house, they would practically see him, lying on a very, very opulent bed, and so on and so forth. So the description of how he used to live in a very opulent way is given in the Chaitanya Charitamrita as well. So Sri Gadadhar Pandit went over and he saw him in that particular condition. And he was about to give up on him when he was restrained by other devotees. And the other devotees started reading about Krishna's pastimes. The same personality who appeared to be completely absorbed in luxury practically went into a trance due to pure devotional service. He went into pure loving emotions in his heart, and he fell out of the bed onto the ground. Sri Gadadhar Pandit, who was the embodiment of renunciation, he was considered to be extraordinarily strict with his renunciation, accepted this Grahastha businessman as his guru. Yeah. So the Chaitanya Charitamrita has given us all these examples of very, very rich personalities who lived very opulently, quite, I would say, opulently, depending on when they were in the context of time, who are also great devotees. So there's nothing against lifestyle. It has more to do with the ability to deal with such lifestyles. It is not possible for everyone to achieve those lifestyles. But because one comes in touch with passion, they start desiring those lifestyles, but they don't realize that they can't handle it. They don't realize that they can get into trouble if they keep the desire, because they're simply going to desire something which is not going to manifest. As a consequence, they're going to become very disappointed in life. And they're going to feel miserable. And then you have the concept of miserable devotee, unhappy devotee. Because I had this desire, that desire, I haven't achieved this, I haven't achieved that. I wanted to be promoted, I haven't achieved that. I wanted this and I wanted that. And this is basically the root cause of misery, because you're in touch with the mode of passion. Yeah. So that's the message that was being conveyed. Now, what is the other question here? My question is, what's the difference between offender and one who has weakness in the context of Mahaprabhu forgiving one while not extending the same to the other? The offender is knowledgeable. He has been given mercy. His is not a circumstance of weakness. His is a circumstance of false pride, where he is materially situated in certain ways, where he has become an offender to the Vaishnavas. Yeah. This has got nothing to do with being weak. Being weak is where one is not able to manage the assault of the senses. Krishna would help such a person by giving them power. They would give them all kinds of facilities. Krishna would give them all kinds of facilities for them to be able to move forward, if they are simple enough in their hearts to understand that they are weak and they need help, and they have humility to seek help from the devotees. Krishna would give them help. Yeah. So the offender, on the other hand, is someone who practically is envious of the devotees to such an extent that, knowing fully well as to what he is, knowing fully well as to what the devotee is, they commit the offense of practically ill-treating devotees, which is what we notice with the doorkeepers in Vaikuntha. Momentarily, they ill-treated the sages, and they were not without knowledge. They were Vaishnavas themselves, and they should have recognized this. Why did they not recognize? Because they forgot Krishna briefly. As a consequence, they couldn't recognize who was dear to Krishna and who wasn't. So that's the difference. That is why Mahaprabhu wanted to forgive those who are weak, and he wasn't ready to forgive those who are offenders. I think your confusion about weakness and offender has to do with the example I gave of the sannyasi who fell down. I gave that example simply to give context to the fact that the sannyasi had a social responsibility of leading others, and he had a social responsibility of playing a role of inspiration to others. When such a person makes an offense, then they have to give up that body, which is what Lord Brahma did. Lord Brahma gave up the body that practically, kind of engaged in the activity of running after his own daughter. All right. So that's the answer. Now, where and how you draw the line between simple living lifestyle and luxurious lifestyle? Please elaborate on this. Well, this is where we need to draw a line. The drawing a line essentially requires understanding what is it which is going to take for us to not be engaging in activities outside of the devotional sphere. This is a simple question, because if you cannot exist in the world and engage in activity in the world and also accomplish things on a devotional sphere, you cannot. Both things can't be accomplished at the same time. There is a compromise. There is a compromise. Just as much as you cannot basically what I would call as you cannot basically go to work, go throughout the day and exist there, expose yourself to all kinds of stimulus, all kinds of passions, come back home and then start again. There really would be no momentum built over many, many years, because every day in the morning we get up, we build spiritual context, we build spiritual potency by our sadhana, and then we go to work and we give it up, we come back in the evening. This is like an elephant taking a bath. The greatest danger is that there has to be awareness that one is exposing themselves fully to material energy and to the mode of passion. So what is it which one needs to do? Ideally, and I'm using the word ideally because this is a call that each and every one of us have to make. We all need to figure out what is it that is going to allow us to unplug from the world. What is the amount of money? And this could be different things for different people. What is the amount of money one requires for them to be able to say that I do not need to deal with the world as I'm dealing with it at this time. I want to deal with the world on my terms. I want to go away and I want to do a lot of absorbed service. I want to give as much as possible to the movement. What is it which is going to require, what is it that I require for me to be able to unplug? This is something which one needs to make a determination of. This should be a part of how we train ourselves. We should always be thinking of how we can unplug from the world and offer our life in service, more absorbed service, because more absorbed service is required for us to consolidate and move forward in devotional service. What we are doing right now is that we use up everything and all our energies and we come back completely deflated. And then we build up energy, we lose everything, we come back completely deflated. So this is how we are doing it. Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is that one should be awakened to the fact that you should basically have a target of what is it that is going to allow you to unplug from the world. And you should go for the target. And once you achieve the target, then you move away. So that is how you draw a line. What you need to be comfortable is up to you. Some people require a simple house. Some people require a big house. It all depends on who the individual is. And I have nothing against one or the other, because what is good for one may not be good for the other. So we are not really saying that one has to have a small house. One has to have a modest house. We are not making that statement. But one needs to unplug. That's for sure. That is the answer. How and when and how soon can you unplug? That needs to be worked out. And that is what we need to do. We need to figure out how soon we can unplug and give ourselves fully in service so that we're able to move forward. That is what we need to do. This is what is going to allow us. And until then, we offer ourselves in service. Until then, we offer ourselves in service. Because in the West, it's a must to serve, because the limbs are constantly in touch with material energy. Yeah. The limbs are constantly in touch with material energy. So you need to serve until then. and then so our limbs are purified. Now, there's another question. How about developing desires, probably conducive to spiritual life, aspiring to live in the Dham, though we have settled up in a city? Is it that we are inviting further complications in our life as we are not satisfied with what is given to us? Eagerness to chant more or read more, though we don't have enough time, feeling not satisfied with the present status of sadhana? Is that we are under the influence of passion? How should we see this if at all it manifests in our lives? How should we deal with such a situation in our daily lives? In the process of preaching, if we come across someone who started inviting bhakti, but then starts offending other devotees unknowingly and leaves the Sangha, how should we deal with such a situation? I think the last question about devotees leaving the Sangha is a very specific question. Maybe you can address it to me personally on WhatsApp, because there are many reasons for people to do it, and that needs to be understood. We need to understand how we could deal with it. Now, how about developing desires, probably conducive to spiritual life? I think maybe what I'm trying to say here is that this is not a matter of desiring things on a day-to-day basis. Please understand this. You cannot decide this on a day-to-day basis. You need to have a long-term plan. You need to have a 10, 15-year plan. And you need to say that 10 years from now, I want to be able to unplug. And I want to be able to absorb myself fully. And you need to drive towards that particular plan. Between now and 10 years from now, if you have the ability to live in the Dham, if you have the ability to be surrounded by Krishna in different ways, that's wonderful. But again, you need to have a plan on unplugging so that there can be more observed service done. So that is all I'm trying to convey. Between now and the time when we can unplug, there might be a circumstance where we may be in the Dham. There might be a circumstance where we are not surrounded by devotees and we could be in the city like other devotees. All of that is okay as long as we are sticking to the plan of unplugging, because without unplugging and fully absorbed service, we cannot consolidate our experiences. We really can't move forward because we are contributing, we're constantly cleaning ourselves. It is like someone who is constantly becoming dirty because they're exposed to all kinds of things and they have to come home and clean. Now, after cleaning, whatever little is left goes and contributes towards a higher level of Krishna consciousness. Yeah, does it make sense? So that is what I'm trying to say. You need to basically figure out what is the best way to unplug, because you can't really unplug. You can't really function without unplugging. That is the point I was wanting to say. So you need to have a target and go towards it, and you should have very definitive steps taken towards the target. And until then, move forward and earn money. And I tell devotees also sometimes, I give them advice that sometimes we feel that it is better for us to have, a small job which pays us little so that we don't get disturbed. And I say that that's not a very good strategy. It is better to have a higher paying job if you have the capacity to do so, because then you can unplug sooner. Yeah, if you make more money, because if you're going to spend 8 hours in a day working for someone, I think it's common sense to be compensated a little better. Because if you get compensated a little better, then you have the ability to unplug sooner. But unless you have that goal of unplugging, you could just get very misled in life. That is the point I was wanting to convey. And what is it going to take for someone to feel satisfied and feel that, okay, I've done it? That differs from person to person. Yeah. So that's the point I want to convey. So you don't need to kind of, what I'm trying to say is look at life and break it down as of today and then find out what's going on. You need to have a goal. If that isn't there, then you need to basically be careful about it. Yeah, you need to basically be careful about it. The goal is more important. Reviewing the goal and then seeing how we are contributing to this on a daily basis is very, very important. Very important. That's what is going to keep us hinged properly. That's what is going to give us an opportunity for us to move forward. Any other question or comment?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can I ask a question, Prabhu?
Haribol. Haribol.
Yes.
Yes.
I just wanted to, yeah, thank you for the class, Prabhu. I wanted to ask, even after keeping the goals, for some reason, those goals, it's a bit hard to achieve, or it is not happening. What are the areas that we have to look at, or what we should do in that such a situation? Hare Krishna Prabhu, are you there?
In keeping, yeah, I'm there. But so when you say that you're keeping even with goals, you can't achieve them. Can you repeat just the last one?
Yes, yeah, Prabhu. Okay. Keeping, you have kept the goals, and for some reason, it's all spiritual. Of course, it's about preaching and all that. It's finding difficult that due to different situation and circumstances. So what we should do then, how we are to move forward from there, and do we have to reset the goal, or oh no, we wait, because Krishna is a time anyway. He has his ways. So what we should do in that way?
When you say goal, I want to clarify. What do you mean by goal? What is the understanding of goal that you have in mind now?
Okay, this is a goal. We have set the goals. Okay, how when we should like totally dedicate, totally put our time for Krishna conscious movement. We want to set things that what is do something for Srila Prabhupada. We have okay, that is done, but then there are some other difficulties coming up, which is not because we are not able to move forward. So what we should do in such situations? Are we to reset? We have to rethink.
Which means
what we should.
Yeah, see, this is very.
I know.
Sorry, go ahead. Please finish.
Yeah. Which means like, okay, I don't know. It's just a bit complicated as well. Obviously, I can't generalize, Prabhu. That's a problem. I have to really tell it out that which I don't like to be.
Mataji.
No, then you don't tell it out. You can.
Mataji, if you would give just small example to Prabhuji, that'd be easy for Prabhuji to answer. If you give just small example, any small example, which one you can't achieve, then it'll be much easier for Prabhuji to answer. Sorry, I'm just interrupting.
No, I don't think it is not something a small example. I can't really.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry. Thank you, Prabhu. I don't know. Is it Prabhu?
That's okay, Mataji. So yeah, you can. What you can do is no problem. You can basically, one of the ways we want to understand it. I can give you a general answer, even though your question is not general.
Okay.
The general answer is that if you have a goal of how you want to serve Krishna, and you're trying to move towards that goal, but you constantly face obstacles, and you can't achieve that goal, or you feel as if that goal is not near you, but you want to basically achieve that, and you can see that it's going to please Krishna, but you can't move forward, then you need to put the goal back on the drawing board. Yeah, put the whole idea on the drawing board, break it down into different parts, and see what needs to change. Sometimes the very concept of what we want to do may not be what Krishna wants us to do. So you need to kind of revisit. And then you offer prayers to Krishna and then request him to give you intelligence, because he's very clear. He's very clear that he will give us intelligence on how we can reach him. He will give us intelligence on how we can serve him. So put everything back on the drawing board, because there could be something very fundamentally wrong. What I'm trying to say is Krishna will not interfere with Krishna consciousness. I don't think he will. So there must be something, the way we are wanting to achieve things, which may not be the best way to do it. That could be one answer. Number two, it may not be the time. These are two things. Yeah. But then we put our endeavor and we constantly move forward. Say, for example, the goal of coming to the West was given to Srila Prabhupada when he was 30. he reached the West 40 years later. He was asked to publish in English, and he started publishing in English by writing articles in English to whatever extent he could at that point in time. So at any given day, we want to sit back and say that we have been receiving, or we have received already, all the facilities that are necessary for us to move to the next level. So more than likely, Krishna has already given what is required to go to the next level. We haven't recognized it. So sometimes putting everything back on paper and trying to see, what is the best way to move forward, and starting afresh with the idea might be a good way to do it. The second would be to seek help from those who are senior to you, who may have some insight, and they could offer that insight to you and saying what you should do. These are two things that I would suggest you do. Number three would be find out what you can do with that goal, even from the present day. What is it that you can do to contribute? That will move you forward at whatever level you can, because that would at least give you some forward momentum. So these are the suggestions that I have without hearing the story, but I'm just wanting to kind of give you a broader approach.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Is there any other question? I can take one or two questions. Okay, so we'll end the session today and we'll connect again the following week. The following week, we will complete chapter 15, but I was just wanting to share some insight into some of the realizations from the previous discussion, and also wanting to connect and give you some context about the present chapter. So we'll meet again next week. So we'll be doing chapter 15. So I request all the devotees to read chapter 15 of Canto 3. Hare Krishna.